Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Building Blocks. I'm your host, Eden Chai, and on today's episode, I'm interviewing Dave Freund, who's the founder of Leads. Now, I chose to interview him because he has this awesome virtual leasing agent product, which records your best tour and puts it in a website widget. Now, I'm butchering that. The product does way more, but the reason I'm interviewing Dave is we're talking about when it makes sense to implement technology and when it's actually hurting the human experience and our businesses. With the rise of adoption of AI, we're taking it to the next level on where we can shove technology into our businesses to replace processes, human functions, etc., and even improve efficiency and all that fun stuff. But I'm seeing us take it a little bit too far. So I want to interview Dave because his product blends these two things so elegantly and really puts the user at the forefront of that interaction. So I pick his brain on this episode, but before you dive into it, I need to give a quick disclaimer. Technology fails us sometimes. So we had a bit of technical difficulties towards the last 15 minutes of this episode. I'm cutting it a little bit short, but I still wanted to roll this out because the conversation that we did cover, which sounded great, is super valuable. And I think there's a lot of meat packed into there. So that being said, enjoy. And we're live. Dave, thank you so much for hopping on the show.
I appreciate you having me, Eden. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no worries. I'm super passionate about this topic because I remember the first time I looked at a website that had the Leads virtual leasing agent. And I was like, what is that? Like, is that a person in the bottom right corner? And keep in mind, I've seen a billion different widgets and none of them really catch my eye because I'm like, oh, what's this next widget going to do? Like ask me about accessibility or something. And then I see a human and it actually prompted me to click through, which brought about this whole conversation of when does it make sense to lean into the human element versus replace the human element with technology? And how does that impact consumers? So I would love your thoughts on just why you decided to build that product. And then we can just dive into where you see the best applications for human versus technology, because it's such a hot topic right now.
Yeah, the story is quite lengthy in terms of how it came about during COVID, but it was essentially that, during COVID, we saw how isolated we were as a species from other human beings. And every time we launched a website, we would see a chatbot thrown on the bottom corner. And it perpetuated as a question for me of, why is this here? What is it trying to solve that the website's not? And ultimately how it came to be was there are objective, simple tasks that chat can handle, but what are we compromising along the way? And the biggest thing for us was the leasing experience that you couldn't get not physically being there in the leasing office to actually see the community. So, a couple months of research and development, it was really ultimately the decision to shift to video. When we actually trialed the product and concept initially, it was a simple form that helped to qualify leads better based on what floor plans they were looking at, things of that sort. There were a couple solutions out there already, so we actually shifted gears when we saw a couple video products on the rise and just doubled down on the rich experience of having a human at the forefront of it.
I love that. And I feel like during COVID, that was the great accelerator for our industry, where we were looking at technology to solve any and every problem, because we had so many human problems of not being able to actually take, people getting sick, not being able to tour in person. So technology was like our holy grail to solve for that. But I think, right now on top of this, there's massive staffing issues. And this has been a recurring issue. I think it's just something that multifamily is always going to have to deal with in some capacity. But a lot of the top firms are trying to figure out how can we solve that issue at its core. And it's very tempting to look at technology and go, you know what, like let's just widget this, let's just AI leasing this, and let's just replace that entire function. But as a prospect, the bigger the purchase decision becomes, I firmly believe the more you want a human involved. Think about buying a house, buying a car, renting an apartment. These are decisions that, Tesla's done a great job, let's say, of buying a car and replacing that element with technology. But the bigger the purchase it becomes, the more fear we have around making the wrong decision. And I think having a human there is very, very beneficial. Even though it's very difficult, I think it's very beneficial to make customers feel safe. What kind of lift did you see and what kind of feedback did you get from customers when you actually started implementing that human element on the tour? Because your solution makes it easy to bring, the video of the leasing agent and of your best tour to the forefront and in front of everybody. So I imagine that once they actually meet the leasing agent in person, there's a different experience there that's probably better than people who didn't do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've seen that firsthand where we have, a couple hundred of these out on the market at this point, and I'll be at a conference and run into someone that I've seen on the website before. And it's like you already know them. It's a beautiful thing to be able to have that relationship already there. Going back to your comment about COVID, it really did force us to accelerate a decade, maybe even 2 decades ahead, which I really thought was a positive, a net positive thing. If there was anything from COVID that was net positive, was the advancement of technology, because it brought a lot of the efficiencies to a head with companies. At the end of the day, whether it's AI, technology in general, the goal is to reduce friction. And I think it's a balancing act to reduce friction without compromising the experience for the user, for the prospect, for the person looking for their next home. I just recently purchased a car, and one of the big experiences or one of the big things that I noticed was you enter a portal, you get to see their inventory, you get to change your colors and choose your motor and all these things, which is great from a user perspective. But then I got stumped and I had questions that the technology couldn't answer. So what was great about that is I also have someone that I can text at any time, get on the phone at any time to communicate with. So I think the big thing there that I would just always argue is the balancing act of offering a bailout for the more nuanced tasks that AI is nowhere near being able to fulfill at this point.
I think the key element I took away from what you just said is reduce friction, because as an operator, you want technology to enhance your operations. You want to make more money. You want to save time. You want to create a frictionless experience. I think, I made a post not too long ago about how I think the human element is so important. And someone commented, I don't want to talk to a human when I'm buying toilet paper on Amazon. And I responded saying, but what if you had to return it and they wouldn't let you talk to a human? How would you feel then? Right? I'm not advocating that you always need to talk to a human with every purchase. If you wanted to buy that car without talking to a person, you should absolutely be able to do so. But if you're a company looking to implement technology and AI, reducing friction is your goal. So you have to ask yourself, is putting a human here reducing friction or adding friction? Obviously on Amazon, if you're buying toilet paper and they go, oh, talk to one of our Amazon agents, like you're adding a ton of friction. I know that I like Cottonelle triple ply. Like I don't need to talk to a human here. Let me just order it again. Right. And then if I want to return it, make it easy for technology to talk to the right human as fast as possible. So I think the key point that I took away from what you just said is figure out if this is reducing or adding friction using technology or making sure there's more of a human element. Like, are we reducing or adding friction here? And is that going to get our customers down on the path that we want them to go? What do you think operators should think about when deciding like to lean more into technology or not? Because that's what your product really does, is it adds human element without adding friction, which is the goal, I feel like, here.
I think that perspective is spot on. There's two buckets right here in terms of perspective. There's operational friction, which is, can I potentially cut staff, alleviate operating budget, things of that sort. But the other side of that coin is, am I causing a worse experience for the user over here? And it's not necessarily just humans. It's the richness of the experience that's being compromised. It is, if you're messaging about the availability, there's a lot of AI tools out there now. And if you text and say, what 1-bedrooms do you have available? Well, you're going to get a response back that surely may be powered by AI, but it's going to be a text dump of, 3 paragraphs of 1-bedrooms available. That's not a better experience than a website. That's not a better experience than a floor plans page that has 3D renderings and pricing broken down and it's easy to read. So I think you do have to consider, what am I gaining over here and what am I compromising here in terms of the user experience and the prospect experience? And I think it's a balancing act. I think we'll continue to learn as we go, but I see numerous instances of this where it certainly benefits operations, but now you've shoved, two widgets in a corner and clouded the experience for a user just to be able to schedule a tour or something like that. So we see it time and time again with multifamily.
Yeah, I think also the challenge is we live in an imperfect world. So it's not like in many of these cases, you can just decide, oh, we're going to make sure you can directly call our leasing team, or we're going to directly make sure you have to talk to AI first, because sometimes you can't make that assumption of, oh, our leasing team is not going to answer. Or if you're turning over many leasing agents in a short period of time, sometimes that AI that might be adding friction when people want to talk to a human, it still might be an improvement over your status quo, depending on your situation. And I think that's the challenge here, is a lot of people say, yeah, we lead all the way into AI. And no, it's not an ideal prospect experience. But the alternative is we have leasing agents turning over every 2 months and we can't hold on to one at this property for some reason. So we're using AI to alleviate that pain. And that is actually better for the prospect. It's not better. It's not ideal in general. Maybe they'll have better experiences at other properties. But the goal at the end of the day is to get 1% better every day and to be better than where we're at right now. So I think that's what a lot of people are dealing with, is saying, people will tell me, Eden, you're right. This isn't ideal, but where I'm at right now is far worse than the AI solution totally automating this for me. And to that, I'll say, you know what? That's fair, but I don't think that you should stop right there. I still think you should figure out how to get that harmony of the two, because I think the top firms over the next decade are going to strike that balance properly.
Hands down. I think there's a beautiful balance, and there's companies that are doing it really well. That car shopping experience that I had mentioned, I think there is an art of having these simple bailout mechanisms in your technology, where if it's a nuanced task and AI doesn't have a reputation of handling it well, you have to be able to have a human being in there. Whether it's, I shouldn't even say just a human being, you have to be able to have a bailout in terms of context elsewhere, provided outside of the mechanism of AI. If you're trying to schedule a tour or something like that, but you want to know, hey, do you offer self-guided tours? Well, if the AI can't answer that, then you need to be giving other points of contact, a phone, an email, things of that sort as a bailout quickly for users to be able to jump and get the answer that they need.
And of course, there's so much nuance between all the different generations and how they're going to feel about what you just said, right? For example, senior living, the phone is such an incredible tool to connect with humans. But then you go all the way down to, let's say, some of my sister's friends who are Gen Z, and they love texting. And actually, they never answer a phone call. It's like this next generation just doesn't answer the phone or doesn't want to pick up the phone. It's kind of crazy to me. But there's obviously a ton of nuance between what every generation is going to want to do. And of course, you'll know what that mix is for your property and what you really need to focus on. But having those options and letting them self-select is so important, because a lot of people are just never want to answer the phone or never want to call anybody. And especially with this era of people who did all of high school during COVID and their entire high school experience was on Zoom, I really don't envy those people. There's a lot of social anxiety around talking to a person. But on the flip side, like I said before, the bigger the purchase gets, the more fear you have of making that wrong decision. Like when you're buying this car, I mean, it didn't take you an hour to make this decision, right? So I don't really know where we go from here when it comes to the different generations and what they want to do.
Well, I think the cool thing is that we have the data to validate exactly what you're hinting at, which is different demographics purchase differently and they have different ways to contact. And especially when it comes to an apartment and a lease that could be $20,000, $30,000 annually, it is naturally going to have a lot of questions that come with that. So what's really interesting for us is we have automated Google Analytics events and tracking built into our product. So we can actually see who's clicking to call, who is clicking to apply, and in some cases, actually who signed a lease directly from our tool, both with the website and our virtual leasing agent as well. And what's really interesting is if you look at student, the overwhelming majority of them jump straight to application, fill it out, and hopefully most get approved, but they go straight through the process right there and then. They watch the videos, they go straight to the application, and they sign. And it's crazy. Now, if you look at a conventional asset, it's totally different. You'll see a ton of phone calls. You'll see a substantial increase in phone calls there. And I think that alludes to exactly what you're saying, is like different markets want contact in different ways based on how they were brought up, things of that sort. Certainly, I think websites are technology in general is at a point now where we do offer good channels for all of those things. Hopefully, chat is kind of on the up and coming, but yeah, if you're looking at those younger demographics, especially, I can't urge enough to like let them go through that whole shopping process on their own, because they definitely want to, and the data shows that.
And that's a whole different conversation about the sliding scale of the younger to older generations with how much they trust technology, right? I remember when I was in high school, Uber was just coming out, and we were still ordering taxis all the time. And you would call, you talk to somebody, there'd be a dispatcher and all that jazz, which is now like almost a thing of the past. But, you know, my sister's generation is right below me, and they're so much more trusting of technology because they're just so used to it. They're like, what do you mean? Like, I don't even know what a taxi is. Like, for the longest time since I was growing up, you just open the app and you order the Uber. So that goes right into what you were saying about the student population, because they're so trusting of technology. Like, why wouldn't I just apply right now? Right? Let me just jump through. Like, this is amazing. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'll just apply. I'll just see what happens. And then maybe I'll just tour after the application. Who knows? Right.
I think the trust component's huge. I think that's a big thing to not be undermined, is like, you're getting a lot of companies now who are claiming that they're in AI and they're claiming that they can integrate well and things of that sort. Definitely do your research, because you're ultimately compromising, your brand integrity and experience of your prospects if you get that bet wrong.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, the older you go, the less trust they have in technology, right? Like my grandparents, like they don't like the idea of Uber at all. They're like, just call, like, I know the guy, just call him and have him come. Like, what is this app stuff? I'm not going to know where he picks me up. If there's a problem, I'm never going to be able to solve it, So I think that adds a whole other layer that you have to consider here, which is maybe if your population, if your demographic isn't as trusting of technology, you might be thinking that you're removing friction when in reality you're adding it because of how they feel about using technology in this use case with buying a car. I can guarantee you my dad has never bought a car online, right? He's never done that. And as much as he talks badly about salespeople in the car industry, he's still going to want to buy a car from a salesperson and get that verbal confirmation that he's getting a good deal and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think that's something super important to consider, because the North Star is, am I adding or removing friction when I'm implementing AI in this process?
Exactly.
From the customer's shoes. But based on the demographic, how they view technology, you could be adding friction or have it be a net neutral effect based on how they feel about the tech in the first place, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about, right?
I would agree with that. And I think defining friction up front. What is friction for you and your ops team? What's friction for prospects? And specifically thinking about the demographic, I think you're spot on. Like, one of the things that I've noticed about many of these AI tools is when you go to fill out a contact form, hey, do you consent to us texting you and sending you SMS? A lot of the older demographics are going to think, absolutely not. I don't want you texting me. I don't want you, selling my phone number, or whatever kind of bad paranoia they're going to have about technology with their personal contact info. So I think it's definitely not a one size fits all when it comes to this type of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and now AI is expanding into the phone call space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's viewed as like this massive feature add-on every time it can go into a new communication channels. Like, we can support, Google Business Profile Chat, which is like dead as of like 2 weeks from today. But we can support phone calls now, etc. So I wonder how phone calls in particular are going to impact people's trust of these AI solutions, because the younger generation right now doesn't really like phone calls. So once you add the whole AI component, it might just turn them off even more so than it would have otherwise, knowing that you're not even speaking to a person on the phone.
It's also slow too. I mean, the big issue that I have is when we were initially designing our product, one of the things that I noticed is when you're in a chat environment and it's, hey, I want to schedule a tour. You get the little typing bubbles. Okay, what kind of tour do you want? You get the little typing bubbles. Okay, what time and date works for you? That whole process takes like 45 seconds to a minute, where I'm like, if I want to schedule a tour, just let me click it all myself. Click, 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 I'm done. I don't want to have to mimic a typing experience. So I think that goes back to like, friction can really mean anything to anyone. And for me, it's time. Like, I don't want to waste time if I know exactly what I want to do. I want to schedule a tour. I want it to be in person. I want this time and this date. I don't want to go through this back and forth texting experience to do that. So I think that goes exactly to your phone point, where it's like, you ever hear like the people who are, they're really rude to the automated system, and
Yeah.
people I feel like are, and it's like the second a human picks up, it's like totally a different narrative. Well, I think the reason being is because like they know that it's purely an objective transaction. I just want to do this thing and get here as quick as possible. And whether it's misinterpreted or whether it's a good experience on the phone, doesn't really matter as long as you get there as fast as possible, in my perspective, at least.
Yeah. And listen, I'm the biggest proponent of automation. Like, I'm this close to automating a text to my wife saying, "What are we eating for dinner tonight?" You know,
Careful.
if, you know, if that wouldn't be detrimental to my relationship, I would absolutely do that. But automation for the sake of automation really isn't valuable. And I'm very susceptible to that because I get excited by it. But I think our society is flipping. Whereas as we automate more and more and more, we're actually making the human element more valuable because of how much rarer it's going to become. And, you know, if you look at those like metaverse videos, you can like go into a grocery store with the meta goggles and you can like talk to people and you can buy stuff. And there's like real estate in the metaverse now, which I don't even understand. But, you know, as we continue expanding that, I feel like we start to lose touch with ourselves. And if you're going to automate just for the sake of automating, I think that could very frequently be a net negative experience.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. As far as the new AI leasing products, what are you looking for in the next 5 years? What kind of trends? Because COVID was a great accelerator, but a recession is also a great accelerator for our industry as well. Because all of the things that you didn't notice that you were doing poorly because they didn't matter in 2021 when supply was so constrained, right? Now everyone's starting to notice them. And the AI leasing space is obviously advancing very quickly. What are you looking forward to over the next 5 years? What kind of technology or new trends do you think people are going to adopt? Because this recession is only going to start getting worse, and that pressure is only going to get worse from this point right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think phase one of this was, let's test the waters on a lot of different products that are claiming to cut operational costs and things of that sort and see which ones actually do. I think those are starting to come to a head. Where I see the trend moving towards is consolidating those so that you're not compromising the experience of the user. We see a lot of posts on LinkedIn of people ranting about how a website for an apartment, it looks like a bad infomercial at this point. It's just like 7 things popping up at you. You close them all out and you're just like, I just want to see the place and look at floor plans available. And it's sometimes nearly impossible. Literally some widgets out there will cover a menu or things like that when they're implemented. So I think going back to the core of your question, I would really like to see a consolidation to make a more seamless experience for users. When we see people slap on a chat bot for the sake of being able to ask simple questions, great, I get why it's there. I've seen people put on tour schedulers on the bottom of a website. Like, why is that there? That should be integrated in an experience when a user is ready to schedule a tour, whether it's on your floor plans page, whether it's in a video product like ours. You know, it's kind of consolidating these simple tasks into a more seamless experience across the prospect's experience of finding their next home, hopefully through your website.
This reminds me of cold callers in the early 2000s. Because, you know, there was a certain time when cold calling was super valuable. When access to information wasn't widely accessible, then it was valuable for a cold caller to tell you, hey, like we have these lawn care services, or hey, we have this. And that's what I think of when I see all these pop-ups. It's kind of like a you versus me agenda, right? You have your agenda. You want me to schedule this tour. You want me to do this. You want me to do that. But the user's in control now. So people don't like cold callers anymore because they're like, if I wanted lawn care, I would Google lawn care. I would just go and I would find the solution that was right for me. I don't have this limited, restricted access to information that I used to have. And the user is only getting more and more empowered. So I think it's more important than ever to do this kind of consolidation, because this is only going to annoy people more and more. There's no agenda that you can force upon your users. They're in full control, and that's not going to change.
I love that perspective, and I could not agree with you more. One of the many great things of the rise of technology and the internet is the information is in the hands of the consumer, of the purchaser, And to your point, whether you do have another narrative that you want to shove down their throat, like ultimately they're going to win and they're going to get through what they want to do and what they need to do. And they can research what they need to. They can tell if your property has bad reviews or people are unhappy living there and things of that sort. So I think getting that all out of the way and let them check out what they want to check out. We went through that quite a bit when we built out our product. One of our biggest competitors, two of them at the time, they gate almost everything. And what I mean by gating for the non-marketers out there is they require you to provide email, sometimes phone number, and contact info. Well, I won't be the first to tell you this industry does not have a quantity issue by any means. We have a quality issue. And especially when you're trying to reduce labor and staffing, you don't want them wasting their time on poor leads. You want people who, when they hit your inbox, when they hit your property management software CRM, they are as qualified as possible and educated on your property. So that was a big thing for us. We're like, let's show them the videos, let's show them the property, and let's not push, gated agendas in their face, because ultimately we know that when they click apply, they are ready to go. They've made that decision for themselves. And fortunately, we have the data to back that. I mean, the ability for the virtual leasing agent specifically to convert in comparison to most websites we see is 300 to 400% sometimes. So it's pretty incredible.
And I think there's an interesting relationship between, quantity versus quality, because I think the ILSs over the last 2 decades, not that I remember 2 decades ago, but let's just pretend that I do. I read about it. The ILSs have kind of sold everyone this notion of you want as many leads as possible. Mm-hmm. So if you see that 200 number in your CRM or your PMS, you get really happy, right? But now, when people can't answer the phone and you're realizing it's not translating into actual bottom line business results, that perspective is sort of changing. And these kinds of tools, using technology and AI in a thoughtful way, can help you make that shift so that you're saying, I actually don't want 200 people because 100 of these we're never going to lease here. And I'm wasting their time and I'm wasting my time by forcing them to come into my CRM with all these forceful gated widgets and all that kind of stuff. Our product recently started syncing live pricing to Google Business Profile. And the last pilot that we did, we looked at impressions versus leads that every profile would get. And on the last one that we ran, we saw that they got more impressions and fewer leads than the month before not using the live pricing. And once we dig deeper, because that looks bad initially, you're like, wait, performance is just decreasing. But when we actually looked at the business results, they got more leases from a smaller quantity of leads because all of those people self-selected, and it was a better experience for everybody, right? Their team didn't have to waste time talking to people who were just asking them about the price and then going to walk away because it's out of their budget. And their CRM is not as cluttered, et cetera. So they used automation in a way that's actually going to enhance that human experience. Although it's subtle, but they're catering to the user because the user doesn't put up with these kinds of gated content initiatives anymore. They're just going to walk away, especially the younger generation. They're like, are you kidding me? No, I'm just going to go somewhere that makes my life easier.
Yeah, I mean, people are more sensitive about their info, I would imagine, now than ever before. I don't have the data to confirm that, but it just doesn't make sense. I mean, they have the ability at their fingertips, literally, to find out that information for themselves. So I think gating as a whole, there's a couple of folks when I posted a comment about gating a while back, and they were like, people still do this? I'm like, yeah, quite a few, actually. With when it comes to conversion tools, especially, really, it's you kind of need to shift the mentality from being purely a conversion tool to like an engagement and experience tool. Because ultimately, if you give them a very rich experience, they're going to convert on their own, or they're going to bounce and they don't waste anyone's time, which is, I think, a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a big problem when you implement a solution that has one North Star metric. So let's say you implement a solution that says, oh, I want to get you more leads from your website. And that's the only number that we're going to look at is just more leads, right? So without giving that data context, it can result in a super poor experience. And that's one of my favorite lines ever, is data needs context. Don't show me one number that looks really good and we're going to get excited about it. I don't care about one number. I want to zoom out and see how this number fits into the whole picture. Because in the example I just gave you, that initial number looked worse. It looked worse. It's like, oh, so I guess your product just made this property perform worse then. But then you double click, you look at the whole picture and you go, oh no, that's actually helping the experience. And we shouldn't be shied away from that. So when you make this switch, and let's say your CRM shows 100 leads instead of 200, that's a perfect time to zoom out and go, okay, are these changes actually giving us a net positive experience, net positive business results, or is it making it worse? But that's really hard to do, right? Getting data context, that's the biggest challenge. It's easy to look at one number and just say, cool, it's either good or bad. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember back in the day, we used to hone in, with all my time at marketing agencies, you'd hone in purely on sessions, right? Page views and sessions. And it's like, at the end of the day, your goal as a business is to generate revenue, so that's a conversion. The sessions don't matter near as much when your conversions are increasing. And so to me, it's, fortunately we track a lot of that data so we can see which videos they viewed, how many times a virtual tour was conducted, in a 30-day period or a 1-week period, what have you. So we can directly quantify the time that you're saving your on-site team, because time and time again, we actually do a lot of on-site visits still, which is funny. We'll walk in and promote our product or check in with current clients and things like that. And a lot of the conversation we'll have is, how many tours did you give today? It's 7 to 10. 30 minutes a tour, that time adds up very quickly. And then you ask them, well, how many signed? 0, maybe 1 if they're lucky. And you just think, like, what if you had all that time back? You're showing them your model unit, you're showing them your amenities, maybe answering a couple nuanced questions. I think technology will get there. I know we're certainly close now with our products, but it doesn't make sense to be wasting time like that anymore, for both the prospect and the on-site team.
I think being in a down market is going to help people measure business results better, because right now that's really all that matters. I think it's hard. Technology is definitely failing the multifamily industry in the sense of understanding business results, right? Because you're a marketer, I'm a marketer. We could make any report look as good as we want.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I can make it look amazing, right? Let me just target traffic from India. You'll get like 1 million conversions for $1 each. Right. If you want me to do that, I'll do that. But your property's not going to lease up. Everyone's going to be upset at the end of the day. So I think measuring business results has never been harder, but it's super important in these kinds of times, because if you're just going to focus on tours, it's like, but that didn't do anything. It's a nice top level metric, but they didn't translate into anything. So hopefully technology, providers like you and I to work together to make it easier to zoom out and measure, but it's a whole organization issue, right? Marketers need to align on revenue. Leadership needs to align on metrics that actually lead to revenue. And we all have to work together. And the service providers and the suppliers and the technology builders actually have to make this a priority. And I think that the down market will help accelerate this, which I'm super excited about, especially when it comes to marketing, because like I said, people used to be focused on leads, but that's slowly changing to say, I don't care if you get me 400 leads. I need to see what kind of leads those were.
Yeah, I hope that narrative changes. And I think it has to a degree. It's just, yeah, we've heard it time and time again where it's like it's not a quantity issue by any means, it's quality. You'd rather have 5 tours conducted on site, but those 5 tours, out of 5 of them, 4 of them convert and sign right there. It's definitely not where the industry's at currently. And, they're advancing. You have self-guided tours now. It alleviates the on-site team. Obviously, there's a technological cost there to implement that. I think that's a great step in the right direction. Ultimately, where we're trying to go is fully asynchronous virtual touring, virtual leasing experience, where you can find your next home sight unseen.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Building Blocks. I hope you found some value in the conversation. If you want to get updated every time a new episode drops, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn at Ed and Chai, or just head over to our website, getflare.io, and subscribe. You'll see our newsletter there as well. That's all for today. I'll catch you next time.